I never thought my marriage would end because of voicemails, but there we were. Me standing in the airport terminal, still in my wrinkled business suit from yesterday's conference, trying to hold back tears, while Marcus, my husband of 12 years, stood with our son between us like a human shield. People rushed past with their rolling luggage and coffee cups, oblivious to the fact that my world was collapsing in full view of the baggage claim. Marcus looked at me with cold, dismissive eyes and said, "Ben doesn't need to spend the summer with someone who's never there." Our son, just 8 years old, stared at the floor, clutching his dinosaur backpack so tightly his knuckles were white. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I'd flown halfway across the country for this moment, cutting my business trip short, racing to stop Marcus from taking Ben to his parents' lake house for the entire summer without my consent. I was supposed to have him for those 3 months. It was in our custody agreement, but Marcus had other plans, and he'd timed his departure perfectly, knowing I was out of town at a conference I couldn't miss. Or so he thought. The last thing I expected was for Ben to finally speak up. For months he'd been caught in the middle of our war, silent and withdrawn. But something changed that day in the airport. Something that would end up saving both of us. But that's not the part I came here to tell you. The part you need to hear is what happened 2 weeks later in court. When my sweet, quiet son stood up, pulled out my old phone from his backpack, and asked the judge, "Can I play you what my mom sent me every single day?" The whole courtroom went silent. Marcus's smirk vanished. His lawyer shuffled papers nervously, and in that moment, my 8-year-old son held something more powerful than any testimony, the truth, recorded day after day in my own voice. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand why that moment changed everything. I met Marcus Johnson at a charity fundraiser in Chicago. I was 26, ambitious, working 80-hour weeks at a marketing firm, determined to make partner before 30. He was charming, established, 10 years older with salt and pepper temples that made him look distinguished. When he smiled at me across the silent auction table, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend. Trips to New York. Surprise picnics in the park. Late-night conversations about our dreams, our childhoods, our future. He told me he'd never met anyone like me. Smart, driven, passionate. I believed him because I wanted to. Because sometimes, when you're racing ahead in your career, you don't notice the red flags waving in your peripheral vision. We married after 18 months. I moved into his sleek downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The view was breathtaking, but sometimes I'd catch him watching me as I gazed out at the water, a strange expression on his face, like he was cataloging my reactions, figuring out what made me tick. When I got pregnant with Ben, things shifted. Subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. Marcus started commenting on my work hours, suggesting I cut back. "The baby needs his mother," he'd say, as if fathers didn't share that responsibility. When I pushed back, reminding him of our agreement that I'd continue my career, his tone would change. "I just worry about you, Olivia. You're trying to do too much." His concern felt like criticism, but I couldn't quite articulate why. Ben was born on a snowy January morning, perfect in every way with his father's dark curls and my green eyes. I took 3 months of maternity leave, the maximum my firm offered, and spent every moment memorizing his tiny features, the way his breath fluttered when he slept, how his entire hand wrapped around my pinky finger. When it was time to go back to work, Marcus suggested I quit. "We don't need the money," he said, gesturing around our expensive home. "I make more than enough. Ben needs you here." What he didn't say, but what hung in the air between us, was that he'd married a rising star and now wanted a stay-at-home wife. Someone who wouldn't outshine him at dinner parties. Someone who would make motherhood her entire identity. I went back to work anyway, hired a wonderful nanny named Elena who sent me photos throughout the day, called home during lunch, breaks, raced back every evening to spend those precious hours before bedtime with my son. I thought we'd found a balance that worked. For a while, we did. The trouble started when Ben was around 4. Marcus began undermining me in small ways. If I set a boundary, he'd override it when I wasn't home. If I planned a weekend activity, he'd suddenly remember a more exciting option. He'd make comments in front of Ben. "Mommy's always working, isn't she?" Or, "We have so much fun when it's just us boys." I tried talking to him about it, suggested counseling, even offered to adjust my schedule if he'd meet me halfway. But Marcus didn't want compromise. He wanted control. And when he didn't get it through manipulation, he sought it through separation. The divorce papers arrived at my office on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember staring at them, my coffee going cold beside me, as tears blurred the words, "irreconcilable differences." What broke my heart wasn't the end of my marriage. That had been dying a slow death for years, but the custody arrangement Marcus was seeking. Primary physical custody of Ben, with me granted only every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. His reasoning? My demanding career and absence from the home. It was a punch to the gut. I had never, not once, put work before Ben. Yes, I traveled for conferences a few times a year. Yes, I sometimes had late meetings, but I moved mountains to be present for him. School plays, soccer games, doctor appointments. I helped with homework, knew the names of all his friends, could recite his favorite dinosaurs in order of preference. I was there. I had always been there. But Marcus had been quietly building a different narrative for years. To his family, to our friends, even to Ben. The story of the absent mother, the career woman who chose ambition over family. And people believed him because he was charming, confident, the kind of father who showed up to school events with homemade cupcakes and coached Little League on weekends. No one saw how he'd schedule those events on days he knew I had unmovable work commitments. No one noticed how he'd forget to tell me about school functions until the last minute. No one realized he was setting me up to fail as a mother while positioning himself as parent of the year. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I fought the divorce terms with everything I had, hired the best family lawyer in Chicago, gathered evidence of my involvement in Ben's life, photographs, school records showing I was his emergency contact, and attended parent-teacher conferences, testimony from Elena about my daily routines with Ben. It drained my savings and consumed every free moment. But I wasn't going to let Marcus rewrite our history. The temporary custody arrangement during divorce proceedings was slightly better, alternating weeks, but still nowhere near the equal parenting time I deserved. And that's when Marcus escalated his campaign. He started canceling my scheduled calls with Ben when he was at his father's house. "Ben's too busy playing," he'd text. Or, "He's already asleep." Sometimes he wouldn't respond at all. When I did manage to speak with Ben, I could hear Marcus in the background, hovering, monitoring. Ben's voice would sound small, his answers monosyllabic. That's when I started leaving voicemails. Every single day, without fail, I'd call when I knew Ben would be getting ready for school. If he answered, wonderful. If not, I'd leave a message telling him about my day, asking about his, reminding him how much I loved him. Sometimes I'd sing silly songs or tell him jokes or describe a cool bird I saw outside my window. Other times, when things were particularly hard, I'd just say, "Good morning, buddy. It's Mom. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Have an amazing day." I had no idea if he was hearing these messages. Marcus had control of Ben's phone, a simple flip phone we'd gotten him for emergencies, and could easily delete anything before Ben saw it. But I couldn't bear the thought of my son believing, even for a day, that I'd forgotten him. So I kept calling. Day after day, week after week. A one-sided conversation with the person I loved most in the world. At the same time, Marcus was telling the court mediator that I made no effort to communicate during his weeks with Ben, that I was detached and preoccupied with work. The contrast between his accusations and my daily calls was stark, but without proof that Ben was receiving my messages, it was his word against mine. The breaking point came when I had to travel to New York for an annual marketing conference. It had been scheduled for months, and I'd arranged with Marcus to switch our weeks so I wouldn't miss time with Ben. He agreed initially, but 3 days before my flight, he texted saying he couldn't accommodate the switch after all. Something about his parents visiting. I offered to fly Ben to New York with me. He'd never been, and I could turn it into an adventure for him between my conference sessions. Marcus refused, said it would disrupt Ben's routine. I was stuck. The conference was mandatory for my position. I'd already rescheduled as much as possible to minimize my time away. If I skipped it entirely, I risked my job, the job that paid for Ben's school, his health care, the child support that Marcus, despite his claims of financial superiority, was frequently late in paying. So I went. Cut the trip from 5 days to 3. Arranged to present my segment on the first day so I could fly back as soon as possible. Called Ben's phone twice daily, leaving my usual voicemails when he didn't answer. It was during this trip that I got the emergency call from my neighbor, Tasha. "Olivia, I just saw Marcus loading suitcases into his car. Ben was with him and they had a lot of stuff, like more than for a weekend." My blood ran cold. I called Marcus immediately. No answer. Called his parents. No answer. Called Ben's phone over and over. Nothing. It took 6 frantic hours and a call to my lawyer to discover what was happening. Marcus had decided to take Ben to his parents' lake house in Michigan for the summer. 3 months. Without discussing it with me. Without court approval. Directly violating our temporary custody agreement. My lawyer filed an emergency motion, while I booked the first flight back to Chicago. By the time I landed, we had a court order demanding Marcus return with Ben immediately. But we still had to find them, and Marcus wasn't answering his phone. It was Tasha who saved us again. She remembered Marcus mentioning they were flying to Michigan because the drive was too long. One call to his parents' neighbor confirmed they were expected that evening. I didn't even go home from the airport. Just bought a ticket on the next flight to Grand Rapids and prayed I'd get there in time. I made it by the skin of my teeth. Spotted them at baggage claim, Marcus confidently pulling 2 large suitcases off the carousel while Ben stood quietly beside him, clutching that dinosaur backpack. And that's where I found myself, exhausted and rumpled, confronting my ex-husband while travelers streamed around us like water around rocks. "You can't take him, Marcus. I have a court order." I held out the paper my lawyer had emailed me. He barely glanced at it. "Ben wants to be with me this summer, don't you, buddy?" Ben didn't answer, didn't look up. My heart cracked seeing him so withdrawn, so unlike the vibrant boy I knew. "This isn't about what either of us wants," I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage and fear coursing through me. "This is about following the custody agreement we both signed," Marcus scoffed. "The agreement that gives me primary custody because you're never there. The one that recognizes I'm the stable parent? That agreement? You know that's not true." I was dangerously close to tears. "I've never missed a single important moment in his life unless you deliberately kept it from me. Tell that to the judge." Marcus grabbed Ben's hand. "Come on, son. Grandma and Grandpa are waiting." That's when something unexpected happened. Ben pulled his hand away from his father's and took a step toward me. It was small, barely noticeable, but in that moment it felt seismic. "I want to go with Mom," he said quietly. Marcus's face darkened. "Ben, we talked about this. Remember all the fun we're going to have at the lake? The jet skis? The campfires?" Ben looked up at him, then at me, conflict written across his face. This wasn't fair. He shouldn't have to choose. No child should. An airport security officer approached, drawn by our tense conversation. "Everything okay here?" I showed him the court order. Explained the situation as calmly as I could. Marcus argued, his charm momentarily eclipsed by frustration. The officer radioed for backup and suggested we all sit down while they verified the documents. 40 excruciating minutes later, after calls to the court and to both our lawyers, the verdict came down. Ben would come home with me, as per the existing custody agreement. We would have to appear before the family court judge the following week to address Marcus's attempted violation. The ride home was quiet. Ben fell asleep in the back seat of the taxi, exhaustion finally catching up to him. I watched his reflection. In the window, streetlights illuminating his face in brief flashes, and wondered what was going through his mind. How much had Marcus told him about me? How many lies had become truths in his 8-year-old understanding of the world? When we got home, I carried him to his bedroom, the room I'd kept exactly as he liked it. Dinosaur posters on the walls, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, his collection of rocks and feathers arranged on the bookshelf. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "I love you, Ben. I'm right here. I've always been right here." The next morning, I took the day off work, made chocolate chip pancakes, Ben's favorite. We were sitting at the kitchen table, Ben methodically cutting his pancakes into perfect triangles, when he looked up at me with his serious green eyes. "Dad says you don't really want me," he said. The words were like physical blows. He says, "That's why you're always working instead of being with me." I put down my coffee, fighting to keep my expression neutral when what I wanted was to scream. "That's not true, Ben. Not even a little bit. I work because I have to, and because I actually like my job. But there is nothing in this world more important to me than you." He studied me, his face unreadable. "Then why don't you call me when I'm at Dad's?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean, buddy? I call you every single day." "No, you don't." He stabbed a piece of pancake. "Dad says you're too busy." I felt something shift inside me, grief transforming into clarity, then determination. "Ben, can I see your phone?" He shrugged and pointed to his backpack by the door. I retrieved the small flip phone and opened it, navigated to his voicemail. Empty, just as I suspected. Marcus had been deleting my messages. "Buddy, I've called you. Every morning. I've left you a message every single day that you're not with me. I promise." He looked skeptical. And who could blame him? Children trust what they're told, especially by parents. If Marcus had been systematically erasing evidence of my presence while telling Ben I didn't care enough to call, what reason would he have to doubt it? That's when I remembered my own phone. I'd saved copies of every voicemail in my sent messages folder, a digital breadcrumb trail of my love for my son. I grabbed it from my purse and pulled up the folder. "Look," I said gently. "These are all messages I sent to you. One every day." I scrolled through the list, showing him the dates, the times. Ben's eyes widened. He took the phone from me and started playing one of the recordings. My voice filled the kitchen. "Good morning, dinosaur expert. It's Mom. I'm wondering if you can help settle a debate at my office. Tara thinks a velociraptor could definitely beat a T-Rex in a fight because they're smarter and faster, but I think the T-Rex's giant chompers give it the advantage. What do you think? Call me back with your professional opinion. Love you bigger than the sky, buddy." Ben looked up at me, confusion clouding his features. "I never got that one. You asked about dinosaurs?" "I did. And you never called back, so I just figured you were busy." I kept my tone light, not wanting to put him in the middle more than he already was. He reached for the phone again, scrolling through the messages, stopping randomly to play another one. This time, it was me singing a silly wake-up song I'd made up when he was a toddler. He actually smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but the first real one I'd seen in months. "You sing that every time I stay at your house," he said. "I do. Because it always makes you laugh, even when you pretend to be too cool for it." He played another message, and another. Dozens of moments from our separate lives, connected by my voice, my love, my daily reminder that distance didn't diminish what we meant to each other. When he finally put the phone down, his eyes were shiny with unshed tears. "Dad said you forgot about me when I'm not here." I reached across the table and took his small hands in mine. "Ben, I need you to hear me. I think about you every minute of every day. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I fall asleep. I could never, ever forget you. Not for a single second." He nodded slowly, processing. Then he asked the question that would change everything. "Can I keep your phone? To listen to the messages?" "Of course you can, buddy. It's an old phone anyway. I've been meaning to get a new one." This wasn't entirely true, but it seemed insignificant compared to what those messages meant to him. I didn't know then how important that decision would be. Didn't realize that by giving Ben my phone, I was giving him both evidence and agency, the power to know the truth and, eventually, to share it. The court date arrived faster than I expected. My lawyer had prepared a strong case about Marcus's attempted violation of our custody agreement, but we both knew family court was unpredictable. Judges had wide discretion, and despite the court order I'd obtained, Marcus was skilled at presenting himself as the reasonable party. I wore a simple navy dress, pearl earrings my grandmother had given me, minimal makeup. Wanted to look professional but not cold, put together but not unapproachable, the armor of a mother fighting for her child. Ben wasn't supposed to attend. We'd arranged for Elena to watch him during the hearing. But as I was gathering my documents that morning, he appeared in the doorway of my home office, dressed in khaki pants and a button-down shirt, my old phone clutched in his hand. "I want to come," he said firmly. "Honey, court isn't really a place for kids. It might be boring or—" I hesitated, not wanting to say upsetting. "I need to be there." He had a determination in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "I have something important to tell the judge." My lawyer had advised against involving Ben directly. Said it could backfire, that Marcus might claim I was manipulating him. But looking at my son's resolute expression, I realized this wasn't about me anymore. This was about his truth, his need to be heard. "Okay," I said finally. "But you'll have to sit quietly most of the time. And if the judge doesn't want to talk to you, we have to respect that." He nodded solemnly. "I understand." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room with a raised desk at the front where the judge would sit. Marcus was already there with his lawyer, looking confident in an expensive suit. He frowned when he saw Ben beside me, leaning over to whisper something to his attorney. Judge Rebecca Winters entered, a stern-looking woman with silver-streaked black hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. She reviewed the case briefly, then addressed the issue at hand. Marcus's attempt to take Ben out of state without permission. Marcus's lawyer spoke first, spinning a tale about a simple misunderstanding. How Marcus had planned this special summer with his parents months ago. How he thought the custody agreement allowed for extended vacation time. How he'd tried to reach me but couldn't, because I was, once again, away on business. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, as lie after lie filled the room. My lawyer countered effectively, presenting evidence of the emergency court order, the airport confrontation, the pattern of Marcus interfering with my parenting time. But I could see the judge's expression remaining neutral, measuring each side's claims against the other. Then Marcus himself took the stand, radiating sincerity as he spoke about his concerns for Ben's well-being. "Your Honor, I've tried to co-parent effectively with Ms. Reynolds, but her priority has always been her career. Ben needs stability, consistency. He needs to know his parent will be there when he wakes up in the morning, not off at another conference, or working late at the office. My lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Marcus had painted me as the workaholic mother, the absent parent, and himself as the devoted father who just wanted what was best for our son. It was the same narrative he'd been crafting for years, but hearing it spoken aloud in court made it seem more credible somehow, more devastating. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke from the heart. Described how I'd balanced motherhood and career from day one. How I'd never missed a school event unless Marcus had deliberately scheduled it during my workday or failed to inform me. How I'd called Ben every single day we were apart, leaving voicemails that apparently never reached him. Ms. Reynolds? Judge Winters interrupted. Do you have any evidence of these daily calls? Phone records, perhaps. Before my lawyer could respond, a small voice piped up from beside me. I do. All eyes turned to Ben. The judge looked surprised, as if suddenly remembering there was a child in the room. Young man, this isn't... Please, Ben said, standing up, clutching my old phone in both hands. Mom didn't ask me to come. I wanted to. I need to tell you something important. Judge Winters glanced at both lawyers, then at me and Marcus. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. All right, Ben. What would you like to share with the court? Ben walked forward, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. He stopped in front of the judge's bench, looking impossibly small, but somehow determined. My dad said my mom never calls me when I'm at his house. He said she's too busy and doesn't care. But that's not true. Marcus shifted in his seat, a flicker of unease crossing his face. His lawyer leaned over to whisper something, but he waved her off. How do you know that's not true, Ben? The judge asked gently. Ben held up the phone. Because she left me a message every day. She thought I was getting them, but I wasn't. Dad was deleting them before I could hear them. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened with interest. That's a serious statement, Ben. Do you have these messages? Yes, ma'am. Ben was gaining confidence now. Mom saved them all on her old phone. She gave it to me so I could listen to them whenever I missed her. He looked directly at Marcus for the first time. I've listened to all of them now. There's one for every single day I wasn't with her. The judge gestured for Ben to approach. May I see the phone, please? Ben handed it over, carefully showing her how to access the saved messages folder. The judge scrolled through, eyebrows rising, at the sheer volume of entries. There are hundreds here, she noted. 342, Ben said precisely. I counted them. Judge Winters selected one at random and pressed play. The courtroom filled with my voice, warm and slightly rushed. Good morning, buddy. It's Mom. Just checking in before your big science test today. Remember what we practiced about the solar system? Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. I know you'll ace it. Can't wait to hear how it goes. Love you to Pluto and back, even if it's not officially a planet anymore. She played another, Hey, Benjamin. Mom here. I saw the coolest hawk outside my office window today. Made me think of that bird-watching hike we did last spring. Remember how excited you were when we spotted the cardinal? We should do that again soon. Miss your face. Love you more than chocolate ice cream with rainbow sprinkles. And another, Morning, sunshine, it's Mom. I had a dream about you last night. We were building the world's biggest sandcastle, and you were the architect. Your blueprint had a moat and everything. Maybe we can try to build it for real this weekend? Thinking of you always. Love you bigger than the universe. Each message revealed the same thing. A mother deeply connected to her son's life, referencing specific memories, upcoming events, inside jokes. A mother who was paying attention, who was present even when physically absent. A mother who called faithfully, day after day, never knowing if her words were reaching their intended recipient. After the fifth message, Judge Winters stopped. The courtroom was silent. She looked at Marcus, who was staring at the table, jaw clenched. "Mr. Johnson, did you delete these messages before your son could hear them?" Marcus's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, there could be many explanations. Perhaps the phone was malfunctioning, or—" "I'm asking Mr. Johnson directly," the judge cut in, her tone sharp. Marcus cleared his throat. "I might have deleted some messages that I felt were disruptive to Ben's routine at my house." "Some messages?" Ben spoke up again, voice stronger now. "You deleted all of them, every single one, and then you told me Mom didn't call because she didn't care about me." The color drained from Marcus's face. His carefully constructed narrative was crumbling, and everyone in the room could see it. Judge Winters turned back to Ben. "Is there anything else you'd like to share with the court?" Ben nodded, suddenly looking nervous. Can I play one specific message? It's important. Go ahead." Ben took the phone back and navigated to a particular date. His small finger pressed play, and once again my voice filled the room, but this time it was different. Quieter. Emotional. "Hey, buddy. It's Mom. I know it's late, and you're probably already asleep. I miss you so much tonight. Dad tells me you're too busy to talk on the phone when I call, and I hope that's true. I hope you're having fun and not missing me as much as I miss you. But in case you are, I want you to know something. There is nothing in this world more important to me than you. Not my job, not anything. Being your mom is the greatest gift of my life, and no matter what anyone tells you, I will always, always be here for you. If you need me, anytime, day or night, I will move mountains to get to you. That's a promise, and I don't break my promises. Sleep tight, my brave boy. Love you endlessly." My voice cracked on the last words, and I realized I was hearing myself in a vulnerable moment, late at night, when I'd feared my son was being turned against me. The raw emotion in that message was unmistakable, not the calculated manipulation Marcus had accused me of, but the genuine ache of a mother separated from her child. Ben looked up at the judge, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "She called every day, even when she thought I wasn't listening. Even when she was sad, she still tried to make me happy. That's what moms do, right?" Judge Winters actually smiled, a small but warm expression. "Yes, Ben, that's exactly what good mothers do." She turned to address the lawyers. "I've heard enough for today. We're going to take a 15-minute recess, and then I'll deliver my ruling." Those 15 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat with Ben in a quiet corner of the hallway outside the courtroom, his hand in mine, neither of us speaking. What could I say? My 8-year-old son had just defended me more eloquently than any lawyer could have. He'd cut through years of Marcus's manipulation with simple, devastating truth. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Winters didn't waste time with preamble. "Based on the evidence presented today, I'm modifying the temporary custody arrangement, effective immediately. Ms. Reynolds will have primary physical custody of Ben. Mr. Johnson will have visitation every other weekend and one evening per week, supervised for the first 30 days. She fixed Marcus with a stern look. "The court takes a very dim view of parental alienation, Mr. Johnson. Your deliberate attempts to damage the relationship between Ben and his mother are unconscionable and harmful to your son's emotional well-being." Marcus started to protest, but his lawyer placed a restraining hand on his arm. Furthermore, the judge continued, "I'm ordering co-parenting therapy for both parents and individual therapy for Ben. This child has been placed in an impossible position, and healing that damage will take professional guidance." She glanced at Ben with eyes genuine compassion. "You've been very brave today, young man, but you should never have had to be. Outside the courtroom, Marcus brushed past us without a word, his face a mask of barely contained rage. His lawyer lingered to arrange the details of the first supervised visit, her manner suddenly deferential where it had been combative before. As we walked to the parking lot, Ben's hand still firmly in mine, he looked up at me. "Did I do okay, Mom?" I knelt down to his level, not caring about the dust on my navy dress. "You did something incredible, Ben. You spoke your truth, even though it was scary. That takes a special kind of courage." He nodded thoughtfully. "Can we get pizza? I'm really hungry." I laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. "Absolutely. Pizza with extra cheese and those gross anchovies you inexplicably love." "Yes." He pumped his fist in celebration, suddenly just a regular kid again, not the brave courtroom witness who'd changed both our lives. That night, after Ben was asleep, I sat on my balcony looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city was alive, with lights, millions of stories playing out behind illuminated windows. I thought about how close I'd come to losing my son, not physically, but emotionally. How Marcus had nearly succeeded in convincing Ben that my love was conditional, my presence unreliable. And I thought about how a small act of consistency, those daily voicemails sent into what often felt like a void, had ultimately been my salvation. I hadn't known Ben wasn't hearing them, hadn't known they were being systematically erased, but I'd kept sending them anyway, a digital message in a bottle, cast into the ocean of our separation with nothing but hope that someday they'd reach their destination. They had reached him, finally, and in doing so, they'd shown Ben something crucial, that love persists even when unacknowledged. That some people will keep showing up, keep trying, keep loving, even when met with silence. That's what real commitment looks like, not grand gestures or perfect attendance, but quiet, consistent presence. The kind that doesn't need an audience. To continue, the healing process wasn't instantaneous, of course. Ben started therapy the following week with Dr. Kapoor, a gentle, perceptive child psychologist who specialized in divorce cases. Our first co-parenting session with Marcus was tense, his resentment palpable across the room. But the court mandate left him little choice but to participate, at least outwardly. Elena, our longtime nanny, agreed to supervise Marcus's visits for the first month. She was a neutral party who knew Ben well and could provide continuity during the transition. I worried about putting her in that position, but she just shrugged and said, "Ben needs protection right now. I'm happy to be his shield until things settle." Work was another challenge. I'd used nearly all my personal days dealing with the custody crisis, and while my boss had been understanding, I knew I needed to find a more sustainable balance. After much consideration, I approached the partners about a flexible schedule. 4 days in the office, 1 day working remotely. To my surprise, they agreed without hesitation. "Olivia, you've consistently been one of our top performers," Patricia, the senior partner, told me. "If a schedule adjustment helps you maintain that excellence while supporting your family, it's a win-win." It was a revelation. The flexibility I'd been afraid to ask for had been available all along. Marcus had convinced me that my career and motherhood were fundamentally incompatible, that I had to choose one or sacrifice the other. But that was his narrative, not reality. The truth was messier but more hopeful. Being a working mother meant constant recalibration, yes, but not inevitable failure on either front. It meant modeling for Ben that adults can pursue their passions while prioritizing their families. It meant showing him that love isn't measured in hours spent side by side, but in the quality of connection whenever we're together. Gradually, our new routine took shape. Mornings were sacred time, breakfast together, talking about the day ahead, walking to the bus stop hand in hand. Evenings were for homework, stories, and the quiet conversations that happen when the rest of the world falls away. Weekends were adventures, museums, parks, cooking experiments that sometimes ended in takeout when things went hilariously wrong. Ben's relationship with Marcus remained complicated. The supervised visits revealed a father who didn't quite know how to connect with his son without using him as a pawn in a larger game. Dr. Kapoor worked with them separately and together, helping Marcus see the damage his manipulation had caused, helping Ben establish healthy boundaries without carrying the weight of adult conflicts. There were setbacks. Days when Ben came home from a visit with his father subdued and anxious. Times when Marcus would accidentally schedule something wonderful during my parenting time, then make sure Ben knew exactly what he was missing. Old habits die hard, especially when they're rooted in control. But there were breakthroughs too. 6 months after the court hearing, Marcus arrived for a visit without his usual edge of resentment. He actually made eye contact when he thanked me for adjusting the schedule to accommodate his business trip. Small steps, but significant ones. As for Ben, he kept my old phone, carrying it like a talisman. Sometimes I'd find him listening to the messages before bed, a kind of auditory security blanket. He had his favorites, the silly songs, the dinosaur debates, the made-up stories about our imaginary adventures. But mostly, I think he valued them as tangible proof that some things could be counted on. That his mother's love was constant, even when physical presence wasn't possible. A year after that pivotal court hearing, Ben and I started a new tradition. Every night before bed, we'd record a message for each other on our phones, something we were grateful for that day, a hope for tomorrow, or just a simple, "I love you." A digital time capsule of our evolving relationship, capturing the ordinary. Moments that, strung together, create an extraordinary bond. Marcus never fully admitted to the deliberate campaign of alienation he'd waged. His version of events remained conveniently vague, with memory gaps and misunderstandings standing in for calculated manipulation. But as Ben grew more confident, in his own perceptions, less susceptible to emotional coercion, Marcus's tactics lost their power. You can't gaslight someone who knows their own truth. The final chapter of this story isn't about dramatic confrontations or courtroom victories. It's about a quieter triumph, the day Ben came home from school buzzing with excitement about a science fair project. "Dad said I should do something about sports because judges like that better," he told me, dropping his backpack on the kitchen counter. "But I'm going to do something about communication technology instead. How messages get from one place to another, like your voicemails to me." He looked up at me, his green eyes, so like my own, clear and determined. "Is that okay?" "I think it's more interesting." "I think it's perfect," I said, my heart swelling with a particular kind of pride. Not because he'd chosen a topic I preferred, but because he'd chosen for himself. Because he was learning to trust his own voice over the loudest one in the room. In that moment, I knew we'd be okay. More than okay. The manipulation that had nearly severed our bond had ultimately strengthened it, forging a connection based on truth rather than appearance. A relationship where love wasn't performative but persistent, flowing through circuits both visible and invisible, leaving messages that would echo long after they were spoken. If I could go back to that moment in the airport, me in my wrinkled suit, Marcus using our son as a shield, Ben clutching his dinosaur backpack, I would tell myself one thing. Trust the connection. When love is real, it finds a way to be heard. Even through the static of someone else's lies. Even when the messages seem to disappear into silence. They're still there, waiting to be discovered, played back, believed, and that belief can change everything. In the 3 years since that day in court, I've learned that healing isn't linear. It comes in waves, in unexpected moments that catch you by surprise, like finding Ben asleep with my old phone tucked under his pillow, or watching him confidently introduce himself to Marcus's new girlfriend without looking to either of us for approval. The most profound changes often happen in ordinary moments, quiet revelations that shift your understanding of what matters. For me, one of those moments came on a Tuesday afternoon, standing in line at the grocery store after a particularly grueling day at work. I'd just gotten off a conference call that ran late, forcing me to rush to Ben's school for pickup. He was the last kid waiting, sitting alone on a bench outside the main office, hunched over a book. My heart had sank seeing him there, Marcus's accusations about my reliability echoing in my mind. But Ben had looked up, spotted me, and his face lit up with a smile so genuine it banished any doubt. "Mom, you've got to hear what happened in science class today." He'd launched into an elaborate story about their egg drop experiment as we drove to the store, his enthusiasm undiminished by the 10-minute wait. Now, as we stood in the checkout line, Ben arranging our items on the conveyor belt, he had a system for optimal bagging that he took very seriously. The elderly woman behind us tapped my shoulder. "You have a wonderful son," she said, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "So helpful and articulate. You must be very proud." "I am," I replied, watching Ben meticulously organize frozen items together. "You know," she continued, lowering her voice, "I raised 4 children as a single mother back when that wasn't so common. Worked 2 jobs sometimes. People were always quick to point out what my children were missing." She gestured toward Ben. "But they turned out just fine. Better than fine. Because what matters isn't being perfect. It's being present in the ways that count." Her words hit me with unexpected force, a permission slip I hadn't realized I was waiting for. Being present in the ways that count. Not being everywhere at once, not never making mistakes, but showing up consistently where it matters most. I thanked her, blinking back tears that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. She just nodded knowingly and returned to her shopping. That night, I wrote her words in my journal, a mantra for the days when doubt crept in. Present. In the ways that count. It became my North Star, guiding decisions big and small. When to push back on work demands. When to let Ben struggle through a challenge instead of rushing to fix it. When to stand firm in co-parenting disagreements with Marcus. Speaking of Marcus, his transformation wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it was real. The supervised visitation had ended after 6 weeks when the court-appointed monitor reported no concerning behavior. Our co-parenting therapy continued, though, with Dr. Feldman gently but persistently guiding us toward healthier communication patterns. The breakthrough came during our 4th session, when Dr. Feldman asked each of us to articulate what we feared most about the other's parenting. I went first, naming my deepest worry: that Marcus would continue trying to alienate Ben from me, creating a rift that would grow with time. When it was Marcus's turn, he stared at the floor for a long moment before speaking. "I'm afraid Ben will love Olivia more than me," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "She's better at the emotional stuff, always has been. Kids need that. And I don't know how to do it the way she does." The admission hung in the air between us, surprising in its vulnerability. For the first time, I saw beyond Marcus's controlling behavior to the insecurity fueling it. Not that this excused his actions, the deliberate deletion of messages, the lies, the manipulation. But understanding the root fear gave us somewhere to start. "Marcus," Dr. Feldman said gently, "children don't have a finite amount of love to distribute. This isn't a competition that one of you wins and the other loses. Ben needs both his parents, and he needs you to be secure enough in your relationship with him that you can support his bond with his mother." Marcus nodded slowly, not meeting my eyes. "I know that. Logically, I know that. But emotionally, it's harder," Dr. Feldman finished for him. "That's what we're here to work on." From that session forward, something shifted. Marcus began making small concessions, allowing Ben to call me during his visitation weekends, acknowledging school achievements that happened on my parenting time, even occasionally consulting me about decisions rather than unilaterally imposing his will. There were still difficult moments, still days when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But the worst of the alienation tactics had stopped. The voice messages now reached Ben directly, unfiltered and undeleted. And slowly, Marcus began finding his own way to connect with our son, not by competing with me or undermining me, but by offering something uniquely his. It turned out Marcus was a natural teacher when it came to practical skills. He taught Ben to change a bike, tire to calculate a tip, to navigate using a compass instead of a phone. He took him camping and fishing, activities I had little interest in but that Ben loved. And gradually, their relationship strengthened on its own merits, not as a weapon against me. Ben thrived in this new reality where he didn't have to choose between parents, where loving one of us didn't mean betraying the other. His grades improved, he made new friends. He even joined the school science club, his initial interest in communication technology blossoming into a broader passion for how things work. One evening, about 2 years after the court hearing, Ben and I were making dinner together. My contribution limited to chopping vegetables while he expertly seasoned the chicken he'd learned to cook from a YouTube tutorial. At 12, he was growing more independent by the day, his childhood interests evolving into more sophisticated pursuits. "Hey, Mom?" he asked, carefully checking the temperature of the oven. "Remember when I played your messages in court that day?" Of course. It wasn't something either of us was likely to forget. I was thinking about it today in history class. We're learning about primary sources, original documents and stuff that historians use to understand what really happened in the past. He paused, arranging chicken pieces on a baking sheet. Your messages were like that. Primary sources that showed the truth when Dad was telling a different story. I smiled at the analogy. That's pretty insightful, buddy. Yeah, well. He shrugged, but I could tell he was pleased with the observation. The thing is, I've been thinking maybe I should delete them now. Not because I don't care about them anymore, but because I don't need proof anymore. I just know. His words caught me off guard, a bittersweet recognition of his growing maturity. Know what, exactly? That you're always there. Even when you're not physically there. That I can count on you. He slid the chicken into the oven with the casual competence of someone who's done it 100 times. I don't need the messages to remind me of that anymore. I blinked back tears, struck by the profound gift he was offering. Not just trust, but the certainty of trust. The kind that doesn't need constant verification. That means a lot, Ben, but you don't have to delete them if you don't want to. They're your messages now. I know. He set the timer and turned to face me fully. But maybe it's time to make new memories instead of holding on to old ones. Like, instead of listening to what you said 3 years ago, I can just talk to you now. I'd like that, I said simply, knowing anything more would cause the tears to spill over. He nodded, decision made. Cool. But maybe I'll save a few of the funny ones, like when you made up that song about my science project. Oh God, please delete that one immediately, I groaned, remembering my off-key attempt at a chemistry-themed rap. That should be buried in the deepest digital grave you can find. Ben laughed, the sound filling our kitchen with a particular kind of joy. The unforced happiness of a child who feels secure, who knows where he stands, who doesn't have to doubt the foundations of his world. Later that night, after Ben was asleep, I sat at my desk reviewing a presentation for work. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, a photo of the camping trip he and Ben were planning for the coming weekend, with a question about what gear we already had. A normal co-parenting exchange, the kind that had once seemed impossible. I responded with the requested information, then found myself scrolling through old photos. Ben as a toddler, chubby-cheeked, and determined as he stacked blocks. Ben at kindergarten graduation, proudly wearing a construction paper cap. Ben and me at the science museum, both of us laughing as static electricity made his hair stand on end. Among them was a photo I'd nearly forgotten. Ben at about 7, sitting on Marcus's shoulders at a baseball game, both of them smiling. It was from before things fell apart, when we were still a family, still trying to make it work. I hadn't looked at these early family photos in years, the pain of what was lost overshadowing the joy of what had been. But now, with some distance and healing, I could see something else in that image. 3 people who loved each other, however imperfectly. Whatever happened afterward couldn't erase that truth. The good moments were still good, still worth remembering, alongside the difficult ones. I selected the photo and sent it to Marcus with a simple message. Found this while looking for camping gear pics. Thought you might want a copy. His response came a few minutes later. Thanks. Good memory. Just that. Not effusive, not emotional, but acknowledging something we shared beyond the conflict. A son we both loved, a history that wasn't all bad, a cautious willingness to move forward. The next morning, I woke to find Ben already up, sitting cross-legged, on the living room floor surrounded by camping gear. He looked up when I entered, his face serious. Mom, I need to talk to you about something. My heart did that parental lurch, the automatic response to a child's serious tone. What's up, buddy? I want to invite Dad to my science fair next week. The words came out in a rush. I know it's during your custody time, but my project is really good, and I think he'd want to see it, and maybe we could all go together? Like, not sitting together if that's weird, but at least both being there? The old hurt flared briefly, the memory of science fairs and school plays I'd missed because Marcus hadn't told me about them. But this wasn't about Marcus or me. This was about Ben wanting both his parents to witness something important to him. Of course he can come, I said, meaning it. And we can sit together if you want. It's not weird unless we make it weird. Ben's relief was palpable. Cool. Because my project is about communication systems, and it kind of started because of both of you, in a way. So it makes sense for both of you to be there. What do you mean it started because of us? He gestured vaguely. You know, the whole voicemail thing. It got me thinking about how messages get sent, and sometimes lost or blocked, and how important it is to have reliable systems. He looked slightly embarrassed. Anyway, that's what my project is about. The evolution of communication technology and its impact on human connection. I stared at my son, this thoughtful, resilient person who had taken one of the most painful chapters of our family story and transformed it into intellectual curiosity. Who had found meaning in the chaos, a lesson in the hurt. That sounds amazing. Ben. I can't wait to see it. The science fair was held in the school gymnasium, rows of tri-fold display boards arranged on long tables, while proud parents and bored siblings circulated through the maze. Ben's project was positioned near the center, his display meticulously organized with historical images, technical diagrams, and a working demonstration comparing different methods of sending messages across the room. I arrived early, wanting to help Ben set up, but he shooed me away with preteen embarrassment. Mom, I've got this. Go look at the other projects or something. So I wandered, admiring the creativity on display. Everything from plant growth experiments to homemade batteries to a surprisingly sophisticated analysis of local water quality. When I circled back to Ben's table, Marcus was already there, listening intently as Ben explained his demonstration. And this shows how digital signals can be corrupted if there's interference, Ben was saying, pointing to a diagram, like when someone deliberately blocks a message from reaching its destination. Marcus nodded, his expression a complex mix of pride and discomfort. He glanced up as I approached, offering a tentative nod of greeting. This is really impressive, Ben, he said, returning his attention to our son. You put a lot of work into this. Thanks, Dad. Ben beamed, the simple praise clearly meaningful coming from his father. Oh, the judges are starting to come around. Can you guys maybe stand over there? He pointed to the designated parent area, suddenly nervous. We'll be right here, I assured him. You've got this. Marcus and I moved to the side, standing awkwardly next to each other as Ben straightened his display one last time. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until Marcus cleared his throat. "He's really smart," he said quietly. "Gets that from you." "And stubborn," I replied. "That's definitely from both of us." A ghost of a smile crossed Marcus's face. "True." He hesitated, then added, "His project is about what I did, isn't it? Blocking your messages." I considered deflecting, protecting him from the discomfort of direct acknowledgement. But we were past that now. "Yes, but he's taken it somewhere constructive. That's what matters." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've never properly apologized to you for that. For a lot of things." He kept his eyes on Ben, who was now earnestly explaining his project to an elderly judge with a clipboard. I was scared of losing him, of being replaced. So I tried to make him choose me by cutting you out. It was wrong. The simple admission, delivered without excuses or qualifications, caught me off guard. It wasn't dramatic or particularly eloquent, but it was genuine. Perhaps the first completely honest thing Marcus had said to me in years. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, equally simple. We stood in silence again, but it was different now. Not uncomfortable so much as contemplative. Across the room, Ben was demonstrating his project, his hands moving animatedly as he explained the concepts. The judge was nodding, clearly impressed. "He's going to be okay, isn't he?" Marcus said softly. "Despite everything we put him through." "Not despite it. Partly because of it," I corrected gently. "He's learned some hard lessons early, about truth, about resilience, about how love should and shouldn't work." I glanced at Marcus. "But yes, he's going to be more than okay. He already is." The science fair ended with Ben winning second place overall, an achievement that had him practically floating as we left the school. He insisted we all go for ice cream to celebrate, an impromptu family outing that would have been unimaginable a few years earlier. Sitting across from Marcus in the ice cream shop, watching Ben debate the merits of hot fudge versus caramel with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice, I felt a strange sense of completion. Not because our story was over, far from it. Ben still had years of growing up ahead, and Marcus and I would always be connected through him, navigating the complex terrain of co-parenting. But something had shifted. A door closed on the most painful chapter of our shared history. The voicemails that had once been evidence in a courtroom drama were now just memories, incorporated into the larger tapestry of our family story. The hurt they represented had been acknowledged, addressed, begun to heal. As we finished our ice cream, Ben pulled out his phone. A newer model now, the old one with my messages long since retired. "Hey, can we take a picture? For my project documentation?" Marcus and I exchanged glances, a moment of silent communication passing between us. Then we moved to either side of Ben, leaning in as he held up the phone for a selfie. "Say communication technology," Ben instructed. We dutifully repeated the awkward phrase, laughing at ourselves as Ben snapped the photo. Looking at it afterward, I was struck by what the image captured. Not a perfect family, not one without scars or history, but three people choosing to be present with each other despite everything. Choosing connection over division, truth over manipulation, forgiveness over resentment. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Marcus and I would never be friends in the traditional sense. There was too much water under that bridge, too many wounds. That had cut too deep. But we had found a way to be parents together without being partners, to put Ben's well-being above our own hurt and history. And Ben, observant, resilient, compassionate Ben, had somehow emerged from the crucible of our conflict not just intact but stronger. He had learned to recognize truth when he heard it, to trust his own perceptions even when others tried to distort them. He had seen how technology could be used to connect or divide, and had chosen to study that duality rather than be defeated by it. As we left the ice cream shop, Ben walking slightly ahead while plotting his next science project aloud, Marcus touched my arm lightly. "Thank you," he said simply. "For not giving up. For calling every day, even when you thought no one was listening." I nodded, accepting the acknowledgement of what those voicemails had really been. Not just messages to Ben, but daily acts of faith. Belief that love persists even when unacknowledged. That truth eventually surfaces, however deeply buried. That showing up matters, even when it seems futile. "He was always worth it," I replied. Marcus smiled slightly. "Yes, he was. He is." On that point, at least, we had always agreed. 5 years have passed since that science fair. 5 years of gradual healing and recalibration. Ben is 17 now, lanky and thoughtful, with my green eyes and a quiet confidence that's entirely his own. He's applying to colleges, engineering programs mostly, his childhood interest in communication technology having evolved into a passion for designing systems that connect people across distances. I'm watching him now from the doorway of his bedroom, hunched over his laptop as he puts the finishing touches on an application essay. He senses my presence and glances up, pushing his glasses higher on his nose. "Hey, Mom, want to read this before I submit it?" "Only if you want me to," I reply, careful not to hover. Parenting a teenager is a delicate balance, being available, without being intrusive, offering guidance without controlling. Ben gestures me over. "I kind of based it on our story. Is that weird?" I sit beside him on the bed, taking the laptop he offers. The essay question asks about a challenge that shaped his perspective. As I read, my throat tightens with emotion. He's written about the voicemails, about discovering them at age 8 and presenting them in court. But it's not a story of victimhood or blame. Instead, he's framed it as an awakening, his first real understanding that truth can be distorted but ultimately prevails, that technology can both separate and connect us, that resilience isn't about avoiding difficulty, but about finding wisdom within it. "In a way," he's written, "those deleted voicemails taught me more about communication than any textbook could. They showed me that the medium matters, but the message matters more. That words can bridge almost any distance if they're honest. And that sometimes the most important connections are the ones we fight hardest to maintain." I finish reading, blinking back tears. "It's beautiful, Ben. Not weird at all." He studies my face. "You're not upset that I wrote about you know the hard stuff?" "No," I say firmly. "It's your story too. You have every right to tell it." He nods, taking back the laptop. "I think it's a good essay. Shows perseverance and personal growth and all that stuff colleges want." I laugh at his practical assessment. "Yes, I'm sure the admissions officers will appreciate your demonstrated grit and reflective capacity." "Exactly," he says with a grin, closing the laptop. "Oh, by the way, Dad called earlier. He wanted to know if we could switch weekends next month. He has tickets to that engineering conference in Boston and thought I might want to go." The ease with which Ben mentions this, a cooperative scheduling adjustment, a thoughtful offer from Marcus, still sometimes takes me by surprise. The journey from bitter custody battle to functional co-parenting wasn't quick or simple, but the transformation has been profound. Marcus remarried 3 years ago, to Claire, a pediatric nurse with a pragmatic kindness that balances his intensity. She has 2 children from her previous marriage, twin girls now 13, who get along well with Ben. The expanded family dynamic has been good for everyone, giving Marcus new priorities beyond our old conflicts, giving Ben siblings of a sort, giving all of us a reason to maintain civility that eventually evolved into something approaching genuine goodwill. "That conference sounds perfect for you," I say. "Tell your dad it's fine to switch weekends." Ben nods, already typing a response on his phone. The casual communication between father and son, direct, unfiltered, no longer weaponized, is perhaps the greatest victory of our long journey. Later that evening, after Ben has gone to meet friends for a movie, I sit on my balcony with a glass of wine. The Chicago skyline glitters against the night sky, familiar yet always changing. Like life itself, I'm contemplating my own transformation when my phone rings. Elise, one of the mothers from Ben's former elementary school, whom I haven't spoken with in years. "Olivia? I hope it's not too late to call." Her voice sounds strained, edged with the particular tension I recognize immediately, a parent in crisis. "Not at all. What's going on?" She exhales heavily. "I'm in the middle of a nightmare divorce. James is trying to take the kids, claiming I'm an unfit mother because of my work schedule. The things he's saying about me, the lies he's telling. The children. I didn't know who else to call who might understand." The echo of my own past is so strong, I can almost feel the ghost of that earlier pain, the panic and helplessness of having my motherhood questioned, my presence erased. But alongside that echo is something else, the knowledge that survived it, that found a path through it, that could perhaps help light the way for someone else. "I understand completely," I tell her. "And you're not alone in this." We talk for over an hour. I share my experience, the voicemails, the court hearing, the slow process of rebuilding trust and establishing boundaries. I offer practical advice about documentation, legal resources, therapeutic support for the children. But mostly, I listen, recognizing that sometimes the most valuable thing we can offer another person is the gift of being truly heard. When we finally hang up, Elise sounds steadier, more determined. "Thank you," she says, "for giving me hope that there's a way through this." "There is," I assure her. "It won't be quick or easy, but you'll find it." After the call, I sit with the realization that my painful experience has become a resource, not just for my own growth, but for others navigating similar terrain. There's a peculiar alchemy in that transformation. Pain into wisdom, struggle into strength, isolation into connection. It reminds me of something Ben said years ago when he was about 14 and working on a particularly challenging math problem. Frustrated after multiple failed attempts, he'd push the textbook away with an exasperated sigh. "I hate when I can't figure something out," he'd grumbled. "Want me to help?" I'd offered. He'd considered this, then shaken his head. "No, I need to solve it myself." After a moment, he'd added thoughtfully, "It's like that thing you always say, the struggle is where the learning happens." I'd laughed, not recalling ever saying those exact words but appreciating his attribution. "That does sound like something I'd say." "You did," he'd insisted. "When I was little and having trouble with reading. You said it was okay that it was hard because the struggle is where the learning happens. And you were right. Once I figured out reading, it wasn't hard anymore, and I stopped thinking about it. But I remember the figuring out part really clearly. His observation had struck me then as remarkably insightful, and it resonates even more now. The struggle is indeed where the learning happens, where we discover our capacity, develop our resilience, define our values. The easy chapters of life may be more pleasant, but it's the challenging ones that shape us most profoundly. My phone buzzes with a text from Ben. "Movie was awesome. Getting ice cream with Jake and Sophia. Home by 11. Love you." I smile at the simple message, the ordinary communication of a teenager keeping his mother informed, the extraordinary gift of a relationship built on trust rather than control. I text back, "Have fun. Love you too." These exchanges, unremarkable on the surface, profound in context, are the real triumph of our journey. Not the dramatic courtroom confrontation, not the legal victory, but the quiet establishment of healthy connection that sustains us daily. The next morning brings a rare occurrence. Both Ben and I are home with nowhere to be. These unscheduled hours have become precious as he's gotten older, his social life and activities filling the calendar alongside my work commitments. I suggest making breakfast together, an offer he accepts with teenage nonchalance that doesn't quite hide his enthusiasm. As we move around the kitchen, Ben mixing pancake batter while I slice fruit, he brings up his college applications again. "So I've been thinking about my personal statement," he says, measuring vanilla extract with scientific precision. "The one about the voicemails." "What about it?" I keep my tone casual, sensing his need to process something important. "I'm trying to decide if I should include what happened after. You know, how Dad and I rebuilt our relationship. How we all figured out how to be a family even though it looks different than before." He pours batter onto the hot griddle, watching it spread into a perfect circle. "I don't want the essay to be just about the bad stuff. That's not the whole story." I'm struck by his maturity, his instinctive understanding that healing deserves as much narrative space as hurt. "I think that would add a lot of depth," I say. "Show the full journey." Ben nods thoughtfully. "The thing is, I'm not sure I would have appreciated Dad as much if we hadn't gone through all that. Like, the relationship we have now. It's more real somehow. Because we both had to choose it, you know? It wasn't just automatic. This insight, that relationships we consciously choose and maintain can be more authentic than those we simply inherit or assume, is one that many adults never fully grasp. Yet here is my 17-year-old son, articulating it while flipping pancakes on a Saturday morning. "That's incredibly insightful, Ben," I say, unable to hide my pride. "And I think you're right. Sometimes the strongest connections are the ones we have to fight for." He shrugs, embarrassed by the praise but pleased nonetheless. "Yeah, well, I've had some good teachers." He glances at me, then focuses intently on the pancakes. "You especially. The way you kept trying to reach me even when it seemed impossible. That taught me a lot about not giving up on people who matter." The simple acknowledgement catches me off guard, a wave of emotion rising unexpectedly. I turn to arrange fruit on our plates, using the moment to compose myself. "Thank you for saying that," I manage finally. "Though I think you've taught me just as much." Ben quirks an eyebrow, skeptical. "What could I possibly have taught you?" I consider the question seriously, wanting to honor it with a genuine response. "Courage, for one thing. Watching you stand up in that courtroom at 8 years old showed me what real bravery looks like." I pause, gathering my thoughts. "And resilience. The way you adapted to all the changes, found your way through the difficult times without becoming bitter or shutting down." Ben slides the last pancake onto a plate, turning off the griddle. "I don't think I had much choice." "That's not true," I counter gently. "We always have choices about how we respond to circumstances, even when we can't control the circumstances themselves. You could have withdrawn, become angry, played your dad and me against each other. Plenty of kids do. But you chose a different path." He considers this as we sit at the kitchen island, drowning our pancakes in maple syrup. "I guess I just decided at some point that I didn't want the divorce to be the most important thing about my life. Like, it happened, it was hard, but it didn't have to define everything." His words crystallize something I've observed but never quite articulated. Ben's remarkable ability to acknowledge pain without being consumed by it, to carry his experiences without being weighed down by them. It's a quality I've tried to cultivate, in myself, not always successfully. "That's wisdom beyond your years," I tell him. Honestly, there are adults who never figure that out. Ben grins, breaking the moment of seriousness. "Well, don't tell college admissions that. I'm counting on them thinking I'm exceptionally mature and insightful." I laugh, playing along with the shift to lighter territory. "Your secret is safe. With me. As far as MIT is concerned, you're a prodigy of emotional intelligence." We finish breakfast, talking about more ordinary things. His upcoming calculus test, my work presentation, whether the Cubs have any chance at the playoffs this year. The conversation flows easily, unmarked by the tensions and silences that once characterized our family dynamics. Later, as Ben heads out to meet friends at the library for a study session, he pauses at the door. "Hey, Mom, I've been thinking about doing a podcast, like interviewing kids of divorce about their experiences. Not trauma mining or anything, but just honest conversations about what helps, what doesn't, how to navigate it. Do you think that's a weird idea?" I'm momentarily speechless, moved by his desire to transform his experience into something that might help others. "I think it's an amazing idea. There are probably a lot of kids who could benefit from hearing they're not alone." He nods, gaining enthusiasm. That's what I was thinking. When we were going through everything, I felt like such a freak sometimes. Like no one could possibly understand. But obviously, tons of families go through this stuff. "Nearly half of all marriages end in divorce," I confirm. "That's a lot of kids with stories like yours." "Exactly." He adjusts his backpack, mind clearly racing with possibilities. "Maybe I could even interview you and Dad at some point, get the parent perspective." The suggestion that Marcus and I might contribute to this project together, sharing our experiences, acknowledging our mistakes, offering insight from the other side of the conflict, would have been unthinkable years ago. Now, it feels not just possible, but potentially valuable. "I'd be honored," I tell him. "And I bet your dad would too." Ben smiles, that particular smile that still transforms his face into the little boy he once was. "Cool. I'll start planning it." He heads out with a casual wave, leaving me contemplating the unexpected paths healing can take. That evening, I call Marcus to discuss the weekend swap for the engineering conference. The conversation is straightforward, practical, the kind of ordinary co-parenting exchange that once seemed an impossible dream. As we're about to hang up, I find myself saying, "Ben mentioned an idea for a podcast about children of divorce. He might want to interview us both at some point." There's a brief pause, then Marcus says, "That sounds like him. Always looking for the bigger picture." Another pause. "I'd do it if he asked. Some things are worth revisiting, even when they're not comfortable." "I agree," I say, surprised by how much I mean it. The hard conversations are usually the most important ones. We've learned that the hard way, haven't we? There's no bitterness in his tone, just rueful acknowledgement of our shared history. We have, but we did learn it, eventually. That counts for something. After we hang up, I find myself reflecting on the long, complex journey that brought us to this point, from bitter enemies in a courtroom to cautious allies in raising our son. The transformation wasn't miraculous or sudden. It happened incrementally, through countless small choices to prioritize Ben's well-being over our own grievances, to communicate honestly rather than manipulatively, to recognize that healing serves everyone better than harboring resentment. It makes me think about how we often approach difficult relationships as though there are only two options: toxic engagement or complete disengagement. Stay and suffer, or leave and sever. But our experience suggests a third path: the challenging, rewarding work of transforming a relationship into something new, something that honors the past without being imprisoned by it. Ben's insight this morning, that consciously chosen relationships can be more authentic than automatic ones, applies here too. The co-parenting relationship Marcus and I have now is one we've deliberately constructed from the wreckage of our marriage, shaped by hard lessons and shared priorities, rather than romantic illusions or social expectations. It's not perfect. There are still moments of tension, old triggers that occasionally surface. But beneath those moments is a foundation of mutual respect that was entirely absent in our marriage. Respect for each other's roles in Ben's life, for the distinct values we each bring to his upbringing, for the separate but parallel journeys we've traveled since our separation. In a way, those daily voicemails I left for Ben symbolize the core truth I've come to embrace: that real love persists through difficulties, that meaningful connection requires consistent effort, that what matters most is not avoiding struggles but approaching them with integrity and compassion. I think about Elise, embarking on her own difficult journey through divorce and contested custody, and hope she too will eventually find solid ground on the other side. I think about Ben, transforming his painful experiences into insight and, perhaps soon, into a resource for others. I think about my own path from devastation to wholeness, from feeling erased to standing firmly in my truth. There's a particular kind of wisdom that can only be earned through difficulty, a depth of understanding, a capacity for empathy, a recognition of what truly matters that simply isn't accessible through easier paths. I wouldn't have chosen this journey with all its pain and struggle. But standing here on the other side, I can acknowledge its gifts alongside its costs. The next morning, I wake to find an email from Ben, his revised college essay, sent for my review. He's expanded it as discussed, adding a section about the years following the court hearing, about the gradual rebuilding of trust and relationship, about the unexpected lessons gleaned from conflict and resolution. His conclusion resonates with particular power. Those deleted voicemails became a turning point in my life, not because they won a court case, but because they taught me that truth persists even when someone tries to erase it. That lesson has shaped everything since: how I approach challenges, how I value communication, how I understand family. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can control what we do with what happens to us. The messages that seemed lost forever found their way back, reminding me that what matters most is never truly gone, just waiting to be rediscovered. I write back with just a few minor suggestions, adding, "This is beautiful, Ben, honest and insightful in a way that reveals not just what happened, but what it meant. I'm so proud of the person you've become through all of this." His response comes quickly. "Thanks, Mom. Couldn't have done it without you. Literally. No voicemails, no essay." The simple joke, the easy gratitude, the lightness with which he can now reference what was once so painful, all of it testifies to the healing that's possible when we approach even our deepest wounds with courage and honesty. If I could go back to that desperate day in the airport, me in my wrinkled suit, Marcus using our son as a shield, Ben clutching his dinosaur backpack, I would tell myself, this moment isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter. The path ahead is harder than you can imagine, but it leads somewhere worth going. Keep calling, keep showing up, keep telling the truth. The messages are getting through, even when you can't hear the response. And I would be right. I never imagined I'd be standing in a college auditorium, listening to my son deliver a TEDx talk about communication, technology, and family healing. Yet here I am, seated in the third row, trying not to visibly cry as Ben, now 21, commands, the stage with confident poise that belies his age. "When I was 8 years old," he begins, his voice clear and steady, "my father deleted hundreds of voicemails from my mother, then told me she never called." A murmur ripples through the audience, part sympathy, part shock. Today, I want to talk about what that experience taught me about truth in the digital age and how it shaped my work developing technologies that protect authentic connection. From my seat, I watch the audience lean forward, captivated. Ben has always had this quality, an earnestness that draws people in, makes them want to listen. But there's something more now, a hard-earned authority that comes from having lived through difficulty and emerged with wisdom rather than bitterness. That painful childhood experience could have left me cynical about technology, he continues. After all, a simple delete button erased my mother's voice from my life for months. But instead, it inspired a question that's driven my research ever since. How do we create digital systems that serve human connection rather than severing it? Systems that protect truth rather than enabling deception? On the large screen behind him, Ben projects a series of images. Early communication technologies, from telegraph to telephone to early cell phones, evolving into the sleek devices and interfaces of today. His senior thesis project appears next. A secure messaging platform designed specifically for families in conflict, with built-in verification systems and transparency features that prevent manipulation. The problem wasn't the technology itself, Ben explains. It was how it was being used. Digital communication gave my mother a way to reach me despite physical separation, a daily bridge across distance. But it also gave my father unprecedented power to control that connection, to create an artificial silence where there was actually consistent effort to communicate. I glance across the auditorium where Marcus sits with Claire and the twins. Our eyes meet briefly, and he offers a small, acknowledging nod. There's no defensiveness in his expression, no shame either, just the calm acceptance of a man who has confronted his past actions and worked to become something better. It took years for Marcus to fully acknowledge what he'd done, to move beyond justifications and excuses to genuine accountability. That process, slow, uneven, sometimes frustrating, taught all of us something valuable about redemption, that it doesn't come from a single dramatic moment of apology, but from consistent effort to understand the harm caused and commit to different choices moving forward. On stage, Ben is discussing the broader implications of his experience. This isn't just about divorce or family conflict, he says passionately. It's about how technology mediates all our relationships, for better or worse. Every design choice in our digital tools either empowers connection or enables disconnection. Every feature either protects truth or facilitates deception. He gestures to the screen where his latest project appears, a collaboration with a major tech company to develop ethical guidelines for communication platforms. The initiative focuses particularly on vulnerable users, children caught in family conflicts, elderly people susceptible to manipulation, individuals in controlling relationships. We can't be naive about this, Ben cautions. Technology will always be used in ways its creators didn't intend. But we can be thoughtful. We can anticipate potential harms. We can build safeguards for the most vulnerable users. And most importantly, we can design with human well-being as our North Star, not just engagement metrics or profit margins. The audience applauds enthusiastically. I notice several people wiping away tears, moved by the combination of personal, narrative, and visionary thinking that characterizes Ben's approach. He's found a way to transform his painful experience into purposeful work, not by denying the hurt or glossing over the difficulty, but by extracting meaning from it, by using it as fuel for creation rather than destruction. As he wraps up his talk, Ben shares a final reflection. Those deleted voicemails represented absence, a manufactured silence where there should have been connection. But eventually, the truth surfaced. The messages were recovered, the real story was told. He pauses, making eye contact with different sections of the audience. And in that experience lies hope, that what appears broken can be restored, that what seems lost can be found, that relationships damaged by misuse of technology can also be healed through thoughtful application of better tools, better communication, better choices. The standing ovation that follows is immediate and enthusiastic. I rise with everyone else, applauding my son not just for this impressive talk, but for the remarkable journey that brought him to this stage. From a confused child caught in parental conflict to a young man using his experience to create positive change in the world. After the event, we gather in the reception area, a surprisingly comfortable reunion of our blended family constellation. Marcus and Claire with the twins, now 17 and applying to colleges themselves. My partner David, who entered our lives 4 years ago, bringing his warm steadiness and genuine affection for Ben. And me, no longer defining myself primarily through the lens of that difficult divorce, but carrying its lessons into a life that has expanded in ways I couldn't have imagined during those darkest days. Ben moves through the crowd, accepting congratulations from professors and fellow students. occasionally glancing our way with a smile that still holds traces of the 8-year-old who stood up in court with my old phone clutched in his hands. When he finally makes his way to us, he's immediately engulfed in hugs, first from the twins, who adore their older brother despite the complicated history that brought them together, then from Claire and David, and finally from Marcus and me. "That was incredible, Ben," Marcus says, genuine pride evident in his voice. "You took something painful that I caused and turned it into something that might actually help people." The straightforward acknowledgement, no qualifiers, no deflection, still, sometimes catches me by surprise, a reminder of how far we've all traveled from those bitter courtroom confrontations. Ben accepts the compliment with characteristic grace. "Thanks, Dad. Couldn't have done it without your support these past few years." He grins. The journey makes a better story with redemption in the middle rather than just villain origin stories. Marcus laughs, accepting the gentle teasing. Glad I could provide the character development, even if my role started off pretty unsympathetic. This easy exchange between them, the ability to reference difficult history with humor rather than tension, represents years of gradual healing, of honest conversations, of showing up consistently for each other even when it wasn't comfortable or easy. As the reception winds down and we prepare to head to dinner, Ben pulls me aside for a moment. "I didn't tell you before, but the talk is actually going to be published on the main TED platform next month," he says, barely containing his excitement. "They think it has potential to reach a really wide audience." "Ben, that's amazing." I hug him, overwhelmed with pride. "Your message deserves to be heard." He nods, suddenly serious. "I wanted to make sure you're okay with that. I mean, I tell our story pretty openly, and once it's out there, it's your story too," I remind him, echoing words I've said before. "You have every right to share it, especially when you're using it to help others." He looks relieved. "That's what I hoped you'd say. Oh, and there's one more thing." He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small device, sleek and black, about the size of a credit card. "Remember my senior thesis project? The secure messaging platform for families in conflict?" "Of course." "Well, a startup incubator picked it up. We're launching next year." His eyes shine with excitement. "We've already got interest from several family court systems and therapy practices specializing in high-conflict divorce." I stare at the prototype in his hand, marveling at the full-circle journey, from a child devastated by blocked messages to a young entrepreneur creating technology specifically designed to prevent such manipulation. "Ben, that's incredible. We're calling it BridgeLink," he says, "because it's about creating secure bridges between people who might otherwise be disconnected." He turns the device over, showing me an engraving on the back, a small infinity symbol with the words "present" in the ways that count curved along its loops. I recognize the phrase immediately, the wisdom shared by that elderly woman in the grocery store years ago, which became something of a personal mantra during the most difficult periods of co-parenting. "You remember that?" "Of course," Ben says simply. "It's kind of been our family philosophy, hasn't it? Being present in the ways that matter, even when circumstances make it challenging." Before I can respond, Marcus approaches, catching the end of our conversation. "What's this?" "About a family philosophy?" Ben shows him the prototype, explaining the concept behind BridgeLink and the significance of the engraved phrase. Marcus listens intently, genuinely interested in understanding both the technology and the meaning behind it. "That's a powerful idea," he says when Ben finishes. "Being present in the ways that count." He glances at me, a moment of shared recognition passing between us. "Wish I'd understood that concept a lot earlier." "Well, you get it now," Ben points out. "Better late than never, right?" Marcus smiles ruefully. "Much better." The conversation shifts as Claire and David join us, discussing dinner options and tomorrow's campus events. As we walk together toward the restaurant, I find myself reflecting on the remarkable journey that brought us to this moment. Not just the dramatic courtroom confrontation that changed our custody arrangement, but the thousands of small choices that followed. The decision to prioritize Ben's well-being over ongoing conflict, the willingness to acknowledge mistakes and learn from them, the commitment to creating something healthier from the ashes of what was broken. Later that evening, after a celebratory dinner where toasts were offered and stories shared, I step onto the balcony of our hotel room for a moment of quiet reflection. David is inside, giving Ben and me space for our own conversation following this emotional day. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Ben says, leaning against the railing beside me. "How different everything could have been if I hadn't found those voicemails on your old phone." The question lands with weight, an acknowledgement of how pivotal that moment was, how a single discovery altered the trajectory of all our lives. "I've thought about that too," I admit. "If Marcus had succeeded in cutting me out of your life the way he planned." "But he didn't," Ben interrupts gently, "because you didn't give up. You kept calling, every single day, even when you had no evidence I was hearing you." His observation strikes me anew, that perhaps the most significant act wasn't the dramatic courtroom revelation, but the quiet persistence that preceded it. The daily choice to reach out across silence, to maintain connection even when it seemed futile, to believe that love could eventually find its way through the barriers erected to block it. "I learned something important from those voicemails," Ben continues. "Not just about Dad's manipulation, but about your determination. You showed me what it means to keep showing up, even when everything seems stacked against you." I'm moved by his perspective, the recognition that our most profound teachings often come not through what we explicitly tell our children, but through what we consistently demonstrate through our actions. "That lesson has shaped a lot of my choices," he adds. "Like with BridgeLink, there were so many technical challenges, so many reasons it might not work. But I kept coming back to this image of you, calling day after day, not knowing if I was hearing you but refusing to stop trying to reach me." He turns to face me fully. That's the kind of persistence that actually changes things. Not dramatic confrontations, but steady effort over time. Not giving up on what matters, even when it's hard. His insight resonates deeply. This understanding that transformation rarely happens in single dramatic moments, but through sustained commitment to a different way of being. Marcus didn't change overnight after the court hearing. Our co-parenting relationship wasn't immediately healed. Ben's confidence wasn't instantly restored. These evolutions happened gradually, through consistent effort and countless small choices that, accumulated over time, created significant change. "I'm so proud of who you've become," I tell him, emotion making my voice catch. "Not just your accomplishments, impressive as they are, but the way you've processed difficult experiences, finding meaning in them, using them to fuel creation rather than resentment." Ben smiles, a mature, thoughtful expression that still sometimes surprises me on his increasingly adult face. "I had good examples, both you and Dad, in different ways." His generous inclusion of Marcus, acknowledging his father's growth alongside my persistence, reveals Ben's capacity for nuanced understanding, for recognizing that people can be both flawed and redeemable, that a single chapter doesn't define an entire story. "You know," he continues, "in my research on communication technology, there's this concept of signal persistence, the property that allows messages to remain available over time rather than disappearing once delivered. Your voicemails had that quality. They persisted, waiting to be discovered, maintaining their integrity even when access was blocked." He looks out at the city lights, thoughtful. "I think truth has that same quality. It persists even when temporarily hidden or distorted. It waits to be recognized, to be brought into the light." His observation strikes me as profound. This idea that truth has an inherent durability that manipulation lacks, that authenticity ultimately outlasts deception. It's a hopeful perspective, especially in an era where technology often seems to enable falsification rather than foster honesty. That's what I'm trying to build into BridgeLink, he explains. Not just technical safeguards against manipulation, but features that actively support authenticity. Because I believe that's what people actually want from their connections, once you remove the fear and power dynamics that drive deceptive behavior. As he speaks, I'm struck by how fully he embodies this integration of personal experience and professional purpose, using his own history not as a burden to carry, but as a foundation for meaningful contribution. He's neither defined by the difficult chapters of his childhood nor in denial about their impact. Instead, he's metabolized those experiences into wisdom, perspective, and creative direction. The best technologies, Ben continues, warming to his subject, are the ones that align with our better natures, that make it easier to act with integrity rather than deception. That's the core philosophy behind everything I'm building. This vision of technology designed to enhance human connection rather than exploit human vulnerability feels especially powerful coming from someone whose early experiences might have left him distrustful of digital communication entirely. Instead, Ben has channeled that potential cynicism into constructive critique and creative problem-solving. Our conversation continues as the evening deepens, touching on his upcoming graduation, plans for the startup launch, possibilities for the future. Throughout, I'm aware of a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the obvious blessings of Ben's success and our healed family relationships, but for the difficult journey that forged such strength and clarity in all of us. When we finally return inside, David has ordered hot chocolate from room service, a throwback to a tradition Ben and I established during those first difficult months after the custody change, when we would end each day with mugs of cocoa and conversation about one good thing that had happened. I thought we could revive the tradition for one night, David explains, his thoughtfulness one of the many qualities that made me fall in love with him after years of believing romantic trust might be permanently beyond my reach. Ben grins, accepting a steaming mug. Perfect. I'll start. One good thing. Watching Mom try not to ugly cry during my talk today. I laugh, accepting the gentle teasing. I maintained reasonable composure, thank you very much. I consider my own good thing to share. One good thing, seeing how many people connected with your message today. You could feel it in the room, that moment when personal story becomes universal truth. David offers his contribution. One good thing, witnessing this full circle moment. From a family fractured by blocked communication to one healing through honest connection, and now using that experience to help others do the same. His observation captures something essential about our journey. Not just that we survived a difficult chapter, but that we've found ways to transform that experience into something meaningful beyond our own family boundaries. Later, after Ben has returned to his dorm and David has fallen asleep, I find myself awake, reflecting on the day's events and the long path that led to them. I think about that desperate mother I was 13 years ago, standing in an airport terminal watching my ex-husband try to take my son away for the summer against court orders. I wish I could tell her that the story doesn't end there, that the pain she's feeling, acute as it is, will eventually become the foundation for something beautiful. I would tell her that persistence matters more than she knows, that those daily voicemails sent into apparent silence are creating an invisible bridge that will eventually connect her son back to truth, that the fight ahead is worth every difficult moment, not just for the legal victory it will bring, but for the deeper healing it will ultimately enable for everyone involved. Most importantly, I would assure her that this chapter, painful as it is, doesn't define the entire story, that there are future pages where co-parenting becomes cooperative rather than combative, where her son grows into a remarkable young man who transforms his difficult experiences into meaningful work, where she herself discovers strengths and capacities she never knew she possessed. The journey from that airport confrontation to today's TEDx talk wasn't quick or easy. It involved years of gradual rebuilding, of trust, of communication, of healthy boundaries. It required everyone involved to grow beyond their initial roles in the conflict, to choose healing over continued hurt, connection over sustained division. But that's how real transformation happens, not through dramatic courtroom revelations alone, but through the quieter, more sustained work of showing up differently day after day, of making conscious choices that prioritize wholeness over woundedness, of believing that better possibilities exist beyond the current painful reality. As Ben so insightfully observed, truth has persistence. It waits to be discovered, maintains its integrity even when access is blocked. And love, real, authentic love, has that same quality. It persists through difficulty, finds its way past barriers, remains steady even when unacknowledged. Those daily voicemails I left for Ben weren't just messages, they were acts of faith. Belief that love could transcend distance, that truth would eventually surface, that connection could be maintained even through the most difficult circumstances. And in the end, that faith was justified. Not because everything turned out perfectly, not because all harm was erased, but because healing became possible, because truth eventually found its voice, because love, persistent and authentic, finally broke through the silence. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.